And welcome back to Punchline. And as promised earlier, joining us now is the author and co-author, if you like, the subject of this book here, Soaring Above the Storms of Passion, Musalia, Mudavadi, and Autobiography. And it's out in stores now. Welcome back to Punchline.
Thank you.
I think you're one of the few people who has been twice in the ring. So let's slug it out for the final time.
Well, I don't know whether it's the final time.
Yes.
I've just noticed that these great world boxers are going to be in Saudi.
Yes.
Doing another bout, so...
Maybe we should join them.
Perhaps.
Karibu sana.
Yeah.
What prompted you to write and release your autobiography at this time?
I thought with time and seeing what has been happening in terms of public discourse on issues of the nation, on how politicians are engaging, I just thought that it might be useful to say something that I believe may add value to the perception people have about people in public office. And bearing in mind that I've had a political span of about 30 years in public life, it must never be forgotten that the majority of the Kenyans today are literally very young people, and they may never have known the kind of intrigues and machinations that go into public office, and what are some of the issues that may have taken place and brought us to where we are today. Yeah, so I just thought I should bring this out.
Put it out there, and it's an interesting time, of course, because you know, the big story right now is the BBI and which way forward around it, what it has said, etc. And you do talk in depth about your own personal experience with the main actors, and we'll get into that. But the book has been summarized by some of the very early, you know, commentary on it as your own book of lamentations, owing to the political betrayal that you went through. Some feel that you should have known better in many of these instances. What do you think of that kind of response?
First of all, it's not a book about lamentations. I mean, when you're in public life over a period of 30 years, you must have ups and downs. You must have some experiences that on hindsight, you say maybe you'd have done better or acted differently. So that is certainly there. But it cannot be called a book of lamentations. This is a book that is an honest reflection of the issues that we went through. Because there are issues where, true, I had some challenges, but there are also others where I came out so forcefully and indeed even acted in the interest of the country. So it's not just about people saying you are lamenting. I was not lamenting. I was narrating events and giving an account.
Here's another one I've been told that this is, you should have titled the book, How I've Been Consistently Cheated of the Presidency. And they base it on this. If we could go into one of the very, I think, interesting moments in your own political career, but for the nation as well. And you write of the infamous betrayal by Uhuru Kenyatta, now President Kenyatta. And in it, you detail how, in the presence of a few close associates, a one-page memoranda of understanding was drawn up with the names of the former Kakamega Senator Boni Halwale, the UNCTAD Secretary General Mukisa Kitui, I beg your pardon, and the businessman Dan Ameo as witnesses. Why were there not formal party officials, or why was there not time given for formal party officials from both sides to witness and adopt this MOU?
Well, the circumstances in that, if you read the chapter, and by the way, that is about the only incident that I talk about in that context. I don't know of any other incident that I talk about. So when they say several times cheated out of the presidency, I'm yet to understand which were the other times. Because you see, people are again exaggerating what is not factual. Because that is only one incident you're talking about, and that is the 2013 situation. Now, at that time, Some of the people we mentioned were also party officials in the program that we were trying to deal with at that time. Kalwale was my party member, so was Dan Ameo. He was the secretary to the party at that time, the party that was UDF. So when they say that these were not party officials,
and on the other side?
On the other side, we had Uhuru and we had Ruto. And these were also party officials of the TNA and URP.
Yeah. I suppose the feeling is that this meeting at your home should have been escalated to a fora where it would have been perhaps separately debated, adopted, in an MOU coming out that really insulated you from the possibility of, well, not just you, I suppose both parties at that point, from the possibility of somebody backing out. Was this a four-power moment for you?
But you see, that was the formal stage. That was an initial process. And if you read in the book, we go further and say that we then agreed that within a period of a fortnight or so, we were then going to unveil this process in a more systematic manner.
Yes.
But before that could be achieved,
said he needed to retreat and persuade.
And persuade his people also. And so in terms of conceptualizing, the whole idea was that, yes, we were going to bring it out systematically to the other, to the public, so to speak.
And you write about what followed after. You say Uhuru later recanted and, quote, announced at a rally in his backyard that some demons had misled him to try to step down. The demons were cautioned not to try and reap where they had not sown, end quote. And eventually, you know, he runs. What for you does this say of Uhuru's character, the president?
Well, at that particular time, he was saying that he had been misled, in my view, by other forces. So I don't know whether, in fact, I do make an account and say I don't know whether I was the one who was the demon in this context. But it would appear that somewhere along the line he
encountered demons.
He had some reflections, and maybe he thought they were demons. And that's why.
Do you see President Kenyatta capable of claiming demons, or as lately has been said, witchcraft put him up to the handshake?
No, I don't think so. I think that is a little bit overstretched. In a situation like that, maybe he may have even used this as a political jest, but I don't think Uhuru Kenyatta believes in witchcraft.
I mean it to say, do you see him, a possibility of him going back on his word in as far as the handshake is concerned?
I don't know. I don't know whether he, going forward, whether there will be any circumstance that might force him to take a different stand. But as of now, if you're talking about the handshake, every message he has been giving in the last 1 year is a message of commitment to the handshake. But as to whether that will be sustainable going forward, that is up to him.
Okay. Yeah. You also appear to criticize the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga for being, you know, pretty much a dishonest politician to some extent, and always having, you know, another plan, a plan B. It comes up when you're talking about the politics of cooperation and what even the leading lights then thought of what he was doing. But more specifically, I want to talk about the swearing in. And do you see him equally being a politician who is able of backing out of BBI at some stage and saying, this is not what we agreed? Never saw this coming?
It's very possible. I mean, we are all politicians, and sometimes you enter into arrangements with perhaps certain realistic expectations. But down the road, if perhaps for some reason those the expectations are not being met, it's not hard to imagine a politician backing out, whether it is Raila or even Uhuru Kenyatta.
Do you think it is in keeping with his character to have a plan B to the handshake?
I'm sure as a politician, if he felt that it was wrong, he would want to give it a different direction.
You twice refer in your book to the 2002 elections as the, quote, stolen moment, I believe are the words you used, which you said that you would later recover at some time in the future. What was your moment specifically, do you think, and how was it stolen?
You see, in this particular case, if you go back in 2002, the party that I belonged to then, which is KANU, did not go through a nomination process. It was basically a unilateral decision by the party leader then, who was President Moi.
Were you a better choice than Uhuru Kenyatta?
I don't know. But
you weren't given the opportunity?
Because we were not subjected to any nomination process. Okay, it was a fait accompli that this is the candidate.
Do you still see yourself as a better choice?
I see myself as somebody who would have been a very good candidate, all right? But as to whether the issue of better, that becomes an issue of the voter when they're making their preference in the vote. That is how you...
I mean, now, do you see that, you know, because in the last few months, I think you've been one of the leaders, at least in the opposition, who have been significantly opposed to certain things in policy. You know, we've talked about debt, etc. Do you think you'd have done a better job as president?
I can say that I would take the assignment very seriously, because when I talk about the debt and the economy that is aching and hurting people, I think these are valid concerns. And if you are to ask me, I would even tell His Excellency the President that I think his focus in whether it is from Jamhuri Day, when he makes his address to the nation, or after, should be actually how to mitigate the painful processes that Kenyans are going through.
You said you'd have taken the job very seriously. Do you think he's not in some ways?
On some of these issues of the economy, I've been very disturbed.
You think he's not taking it seriously at all?
I think he hasn't given it the attention that he should give.
All right. When critics of you know, your style of politics have pointed to this, and earlier you said you wonder, you know, when are you lamenting, and this perhaps would be the second episode of lament in that sense. But they say, surely should you not acknowledge that in 2002, and you sort of do in a roundabout fashion, that it was just you who made poor choices to stick with what some many feel is a dictator, the former President Moi, toe the line, support his choice, Uhuru Kenyatta then, instead of joining those who are boldly advocating for change and staying there, and that if you had, then that would be the seminal moment in your history.
Well, that would be an opinion from another angle. But I do acknowledge in there that I did make my mistakes. All right? I don't know how else I can put it.
You call it a faux pas.
Yeah? I don't know how else I can put it. But in writing, I've said that on hindsight, I believe I made a mistake. So when that is acknowledged, the best I can say is that as they read it, they'll now see that in my moments of reflection, I'm also honest enough to admit that there was a failure in judgment at that point in time.
And yet at the same time, you know, you acknowledge that it is, yeah, in some ways a failure in judgment, but it appears, you know, throughout your detailing of working with President Moi, that you don't really want to condemn him, as it were. In fact, you say, quote, "I have always believed it is dishonest to demonize people whom you have worked with just because you have seen a political opportunity." But would you go as far as saying, you know what, I worked for an administration that was not good for Kenya, and that my staying on in office with Moi, whom, by the way, you had suffered, I think, at the time of the failed coup, and you detail that, and then you still go ahead to work for this man, that perhaps was your greatest mistake, to have stayed and chosen to work for such an administration?
No, first of all, if you go back to the coup, we were students. I think it's important to also put it in context.
That's true.
And many students suffered in one way or the other
So you knew what the Moi administration was like?
During that time, okay? But moving forward, I worked in government, and we were in basically a one-party regime. So as a young man, I joined politics, and I was given a role to play. Did I do something positive? Yes, I did. If you look into the book and you read through it, I made very significant advancements in changing the economy of this country.
So working for Moi was not a mistake?
So,
it's not something you regret?
So working for Moi was not a mistake. Working at times on some of the issues that were hot, that was not a mistake. But,
would you go as far as saying he was good for the country?
But
would you say President Moi was good for the country?
He did make a significant contribution. For the 24 years and prior to that, Moi made a very significant contribution to this country. I mean, we cannot wish it away.
For those who see his significant contribution being running an economy to the ground, the brutal assassinations that took place during his time in office of his political opponents, affairs like Golden Bag and others, you still feel overall it was a good presidency, a good 24 years for Kenya?
It was a presidency. I could not have maybe changed the presidency, but it is a presidency that had its challenges, it had its shortcomings, but it's also a presidency which you could also point out that there were some positive aspects of it. For instance, you know, some things that people forget is that after his term and after Kibaki won, this Mzee actually went to Uhuru Park and handed over the instruments of power symbolically and everything. He did not in any way cling to power. And you remember there were attempts to give the indication that he was planning to cling to power. Even when they were doing the fencing, the new fencing at State House, people were saying it was a barricade he was putting because he intended to continue being in power. But after Kibaki's victory, he went to Uhuru Park, in spite of all the mudslinging, and handed over.
For many, that will be seen as too little, too late, and what were his options anyway? You've mentioned succession politics, and maybe we could just use your experience in the book. You write that even though you knew that the winds of change would sweep KANU out of power, you supported Uhuru Kenyatta, Moi's successor, and we've talked about that because of family pressure, threats, and intimidation. You leave that quite open. What did you mean by that?
Family pressure is, if you read the book, we have also had long association with the Moi family.
Correct.
Yeah? So in that context, you look at it in the context of all this family.
So your friends, you knew them?
Yeah, and issues of people feeling that perhaps on a matter like this, let the president's message ride. Don't go contrary to it. So these are the kind of things that.
But I think everybody will be interested in the assorted threats and intimidation. From whom and what?
There were many issues then at that time.
Like?
There are many issues of people. You know, when you're talking of the deep state and the kind of things that they send out to tell you that. This cannot work, we'll make sure that you don't get anywhere, and so forth. So
deep state is such a boogeyman term. Who do you refer to specifically?
No,
who was threatening you?
So on that one, I'll not say any more than that. I'll just leave it at that.
Are you still afraid of them?
No.
So why can't you mention them?
But it doesn't matter. Now that is gone.
Does this deep state still exist?
I suppose it does always exist.
Is it, I mean the very same one?
I don't know whether it's the same one, but the deep state always exists.
Is it still at work in the current succession politics?
I would be surprised if they were not.
So would you say this is what William Ruto is going through, for instance?
I don't know. What William Ruto is going through, I think is best placed to answer. I cannot answer for him.
What kind of suggestions or cautions would they offer? What does intimidation by deep state look like?
I think what is important is that it is important that in the succession process that we're entering into, institutions that are supposed to be very significant in making sure that the transition is perfect are institutions that are not interfered with at all. And for instance, I flag the IEBC. Okay, in any transition process, institutions like IEBC, institutions like the judiciary, these are institutions that must be safeguarded because they will play a significant role in any transitional process.
Do you think they're being tampered with right now?
Don't you think, if we just go straight to the IEBC, don't you think since the last election and the processes we went through and the decisions of the Supreme Court, have we reformed the IEBC? We have not. Here we are beginning to prepare about the possibility of a referendum going down the line. Even in the BBI, there are possibilities that some of the issues there are going to be referendum. But we have not, as a nation, gone back to reflect on what happened to the IEBC. Even now, the commissioners are not fully constituted. Yeah.
The judiciary? For instance, there's been concern over Court of Appeal appointments, there's been concern over judicial budgets. Do you see that as deep state interfering with key offices?
There's a very serious matter that is happening within the judiciary. Would you want the president of the of the court, the Chief Justice, to come out and start lamenting publicly that they're being underfunded? That is not right, because this is an independent entity, and independent agencies then have a draw on the consolidated fund once the budgetary process is approved. So if we are going forward, I think all institutions that are central to smooth transition processes must be safeguarded and given the necessary support.
But I just want a straightforward answer, because government will tell you there's no money. We're missing our revenue collections. It's not about interference. It's about the fact that we have to review our budgets. There's, rationalizing going on across state departments. Would you say that that is a clear instance of interference? And what would give you the confidence?
I don't know to what extent you may have scrutinized the review of the recent supplementary budgets that were being presented there. You'll find that a lot of big money is also being allocated to other things, and yet you are cutting away money from the judiciary, which was then reinstated. But even prior to that, you will find that even in the allocation, it has not been very good. Let me give you an example of what some of the challenges, and I'll just pick land as an issue. I've been talking to some lawyers who are in practice, and they say right now, if you have a matter that relates to the land court, and you went to the land registry or land court registry seeking an allocation by either the judges for your case to be heard, most of them are coming back with a message that the earliest dates they are getting for their clients to have their matters heard are actually in 2021.
Wow.
All right. Now, that is serious. Resources in terms of digitalization, resources in terms of making these areas function are therefore critical. So I may have picked that, but it's, and given that example so that I can tell you that let us, as a nation, give a due care and attention to institutions that will play a role in transition.
As we conclude, will Kenya's next president be decided on by good democracy or by the kind of intimidation, pressure, threats, and maneuvers of people in power?
I would like Kenya's president to be always elected on a strong foundation of democratic processes, good, predictable and reliable democratic processes.
And as you look into 2022?
That is what we should be working on. And as we look into 2022, unless we are brave enough to say, let's sort out, and this is why there must be consensus. As far as I'm concerned, even if we were to go to a referendum, I think we should try and build consensus a lot on the issues, okay, so that it becomes better. Just the way we built consensus when we were passing the 2010 constitution. Remember, 67% of Kenyans supported it. Right. And in the 2005 referendum, the country was split in the middle, and we suffered as a country. That's why the process had to be redone again a few years down the line. So if we look at it in that context, I strongly believe that if we build consensus on some of the issues that are being canvassed, we sort out things like the IEBC, so that there's no more worry that the IEBC is not impartial. And
then
so
democracy
forth.
Will take the lead.
Then it becomes better.
Okay. Yeah. I can't let you go without signing this for me.
I will do so. Thank you. But I would like to encourage all Kenyans to read it, the ones who get access to it.
Absolutely.
It's useful that they hear from some of us. And I hope they'll get to understand that this is about a 30-year journey.
It's not a work of fiction.
It's not a work of fiction.
As some of your political detractors are saying.
Yeah, it's not a work of fiction. And indeed, some of them were there. So they also have an opportunity to give their version of what they think or what they interpret the events as meaning, or what they can infer from that. They were there.
Fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. Musalia, Mudavadi. Bye-bye.